in this demo, I want to go ahead and take a look at how we would declare a variable. I want to go ahead and create a new file. So I have Adam, I'm going to create a new file. I'm going to start with an empty HTML page. So I'm starting with my HTML template. I want to have external JavaScript file that's going to contain all of my variables and our example code. So I'm going to have a external script, and that script will just be vars.js. And then at the bottom of the page, I want to kick off the process to actually execute some of my JavaScript. I'm going to have another script tag where I trigger a method called init. So right when the page loads, we're going to trigger a function that's named init, and that's where we can start executing some of our code, and that's where we're going to get into working with the variables that we're going to discuss in this example. So I'm going to go ahead and save this on my desktop in a new folder called vars, and the convention that I'm going to use is I'm going to have this file be titled index.html. Okay, so this is our first HTML file. I want to create our JavaScript file, so I'm going to have a new file called vars.js. And in this vars.js file, I'm going to have a function definition called init. And this is what's going to get executed when my page loads. So I'm going to, just to confirm that things are working correctly, I'm going to do a console.log cubs stink. It's my version of hello world. So cubs stink. I want to load that page into a browser, so I'm going to right click. I have extension loaded into Atom, which is open in browser. So you'll see that this file gets loaded into the browser. It's on my desktop, and I want to verify that that file is actually running and we're getting our console.log message. You can see in my console that I'm getting that cubs stink message. So my HTML file and my JavaScript file are linked up correctly together. Okay, so for this discussion, we want to talk about variables, and really there's three different types of declarations that I care about for this class. And to be honest with you, we only want to use two of these types of variables. So the first one, and I think most people are pretty familiar with this type of variable, is I can use the var keyword, and the var keyword indicates that I want a new variable, and then I can indicate the variable name. So age equal to 50. Okay, so I have a variable named age, and I assign an initial value. I don't have to assign an initial value, so this is one approach. Another approach would be I want an age variable, and then on another line I can say that that age is 50. So this is example one of a variable, and right now we're using age being some numeric value. We could have name equal to Bill. We could have married equal to true. So what I'm getting into there is we have different variables, and on the right-hand side of those variables that we've named and declared, we have different data types. So age being 50 is numeric, Bill is a string, and then true's being a Boolean. We'll get into data types as we go on with the semester, but for now, what I care about is that we can declare a variable using the var keyword. So that's one type of variable, and remember I talked about three different ways that we could have variables. So the first one being var. The second one, which is the approach that I want you to use, is a let. So if I say let name equal to Bill, it's essentially the same thing as me declaring a variable named Bill. The difference is the scope of the variable. Okay, so very subtle difference. For the most part, there is no difference. We want to, for this semester, we want to use modern syntax, and modern syntax would dictate that we're using the syntax on line 7, where our variables are declared with the let keyword. There is actually a minor difference, though. And what I want to do is I want to show you what that difference is. Okay, so if I have an if block, okay, so I say if age is greater than 40, Then I'm going to create a variable using a let keyword. So let message equal to you are over 40. Okay. And then I'm going to do a console.log of that message. Okay, and what we'll see is that we get our message, you're over 40. Okay, if I take that console.log message and I move it out of my if statement, so I do a console.log of the message on line 13, I saved it, you'll notice that message is not defined. Okay, and the reason for that is because I declared this variable with the let keyword. If I change it to the var keyword, so I mentioned that let and var are almost interchangeable. They work essentially the same way, other than this minor difference. I've now changed message from a let variable to a var variable. And now if I refresh the page, you'll notice that the message comes back up. And the reason for that is because if I use the let keyword, the scope of that variable is going to be the block in which it was defined. Okay, and blocks, I don't want to necessarily get into too much about blocks, but blocks, for kind of a quick explanation, a block is any beginning and ending curly brace. So it could be a loop, it could be a conditional, it could be a function, but your block is going to dictate the scope of your variable if I use the let keyword. So in this case, since I defined my message inside of the if block, that message variable is only accessible inside of that if block. Okay, so some of you are thinking, hey, that's not actually what I want to do. I want my variable to be accessible outside of that if block. And I'm going to tell you you're wrong. So just like global variables, your variable declarations, you want to keep the scope as minimal as possible. So in our case, I want the scope to be as minimal as possible. I only want this variable accessible inside this if block, and that's the only time I'm going to use it. Then that's the way I want to use it, and that's the way I want to declare it. Now, let's say I wanted to have this message available outside of my if block. I can still do that even without using a variable. I might just say I'm going to let my message variable be accessible outside of my if block. Inside the if block, I assign it, and then I log it. So now you'll notice that it's working again. Because now this let variable has a block scope of the init method, because that's the curly braces that it's defined inside of. Okay, so let versus var are essentially the same thing, except let and var have a different scope. A let variable has the scope of the block it was declared in. A var variable has the scope of a function. Okay, so it will not give me block level scope. Okay, so I can't narrow it down any further than that function definition. So if we want to be accurate and we want the best code possible, then we're not going to use the var keyword. We're going to use the let keyword to declare our variables. Okay, so that's two. So I talked about three different types of variable declarations. So var being one, let being the second, and preferable to var. And then the third, I use the term variable, even though this is exactly the opposite of a variable. We're talking about a const. So if I say, you know, what's our college name, we could say it's Madison College. Okay, and let's assume that that's not going to change. For the purpose of our application, this is an unchanging variable. It's a constant. Okay, so again, constants preferable to variables. And the reason for that is if I see that this is a constant, I know what it is. I have a mental picture of what that variable is, and I know that it's not going to change throughout my application. I don't have to look through the rest of my application. Every time I encounter the college name, I know that it's always going to be Madison College. Okay, so three different types of variables. We could have vars, we could have lets, we could have const. in order of preference, I'm going to prefer to have my variables be constants because I know what they are, I know the context, I know the scope, I know all of that. If that's not possible, so let's say the college name changes, so on the very next line I want to say that the college name is MATC, then I can't have it as a constant. My fallback option is not to change it to a variable, but to change it to a let variable. Okay? So these are the three different approaches to defining variables. Okay, so one gotcha that JavaScript's going to throw at you is, let's say I don't take the time to use var or let or const. I just say the mascot is going to be a wolf. Okay, so we're the wolf pack at MATC. Our mascot is a wolf. I never declared it. I didn't say that this is a variable or this is a let variable or a constant. I didn't do any of that. I just used it. Okay, so I used mascot. I made it up, and I assigned the value wolf, and I'm just going to do a console.log of our mascot, and you're going to notice that everything's fine. Okay, what happened here is because I did not declare this, I didn't explicitly declare it, JavaScript said, oh, what you really want there is a global variable. Okay, so JavaScript created a variable for me, but not necessarily the way I'd want the variable created. Okay, so we have a scope problem with our mascot that we didn't have with age or name or message or college name. And in the next video, we'll talk about variable scope. So for this video, all we're talking about is variable declarations, three different types of variable declarations. So var, let, and const. And then beyond that, we kind of have an order of preference. So we want to prefer to use constants if at all possible. If that's not possible, so if that variable is going to change and it's not in a constant state, then we want to use the let keyword. And then var keyword is more of a carryover for older JavaScript applications to continue to run, and we're going to try to avoid variables using the var keyword throughout the semester.